Okay, so let me first introduce who we have here. So we have Iulia Popovici, who is, you may know her as an art critic, but she's also kind of the savior of the independent cultural scene, an expert in cultural legislation, I mean in law in general. And that makes her a very rara avis among the cultural experts. We have Miki Braniște, who you also know from a lot of let's say, landmark dance and performing arts activities at the Paintbrush Factory, now mainly at the working at the university, Babeș-Bolyai University at the Department of Theatre. We have Lars Ebert, who's the Secretary General of Culture Action Europe, the most prominent network in Europe dealing with the responsibility of advocating for the cultural sector. We have Irina, Cios, who's the Director of Administrația Fondului Cultural Național, so the administration of the Romanian National Cultural Fund, the main donor in Romania for cultural projects. We have Ramona, who's the director of the Centrul de Proiecte in Timișoara, the Center for Projects in Timișoara, who's another outstanding donor for cultural projects, even if based in Timișoara, after running the European Capital of Culture and while running the European Capital of Culture, has established important support programs for the cultural sector. And not last, I mean last but not least, we have Monica Urian, who is a project officer at the European Commission in the agency dealing with culture, education in the European Commission. And Christy, please stay with us in the conversation. So I would like to ask you all to respond to what you've heard. I presume it's not it's maybe new data, but not new information as such. I would ask first Lars to come to help us kind of complement this picture with what's going on at the European level. You also had a report on the status of the cultural sector last year, so what do you know?
Thanks very much. Thanks first and foremost for the invitation and for the incredibly beautiful setting here and the audience. I'm a little bit scared by all the data because I'm not a data guy, but I will do my best to complement it with some facts and figures. Actually, the 2 or 3 reference points I want to bring in is firstly the Creative Pulse survey that Culture Action Europe has been running together with Pantea, and that we published in 2024. And the data that I've got with me largely confirm what you've raised here in Romania. Even in some cases, even redder flags than the red flags that have been mentioned. I think the one red flag with a second job outside the cultural and creative sector, I made a note, was 70.3% in Romania. No?
No, it was 20, yeah, it was 17. But these were people that have a working contract in another sector. Actually, 40% or more said that they have revenues also from non-cultural work. But we don't know exactly if that also means rents and other stuff.
Okay, so on a European level, that would be 34, so rather comparable data. Overall, 50% across the EU report poor working conditions, and 2/3 lack sufficient social protection and work multiple jobs in 34% of the cases outside of the cultural sector. Self-employment is double the EU average in the cultural and creative sectors, 32% versus 14% in other areas. And of course, the platform dynamics are a special case, and maybe in the second round we can focus a little bit more on the platform economies, especially on algorithmic transparency, how works of artists are ranked, or what advices you get when you open Spotify or YouTube or Netflix. Basically, that study has just largely confirms findings that we already knew from the 2023 OMC report that the European Commission has published. OMC is one of these acronyms, Open Method of Coordination. It's one of these let me not be cynical, amazing mechanisms that the EU can come up with. When democratic processes get stuck on a certain level, you have to work around them. And one working around process is you bring together experts in a certain area from all national, from every member state. So member states can nominate an expert on working conditions to join the OMC group on working conditions. So if that group composed of experts brings out a report, it's something that cannot be ignored also by national leaders because it's their experts that have proposed it. So it's actually not cynical. It's a very smart mechanism of raising a sort of reference point that has to be taken into account in policy making. So there was such an OMC group in 2023 that published a report on working conditions, and that basically also confirms what we already know. Working in the cultural and creative sectors is unique and inspiring, but precarious. So everyone knows that we are all mission-driven workers. We believe in what we do. So rather than not doing it because we are not properly paid, we rely on partners, families, and all the things that you've been mentioning to get it done. And other people know that. And we know that other people know that. So we are in that vicious circle of power relations that is very toxic if you look at it in that way. So we know that policymakers are aware of it, especially during the pandemic. There were response mechanisms that show that politicians are aware of institutions closing down, work contracts being stopped, freelancers all of a sudden not having any income anymore. And there was emergency response on the policy level. But was that made sustainable? No, it hasn't been made sustainable. We are back to that permanent situation of precarity where everyone knows, oh, they are so resilient because they are mission-driven. That horrible word of resilience is again keeping us in that precarious situation. So just to add, because I know I just have 4 minutes, add one other report that we published last year, the State of Culture report, in which in October 2016, I encourage you to read it on our website. There's a full report, almost 90 pages. Don't read it completely because otherwise it contributes to your mental health issues. But there's an executive summary of 16 pages which you can read and see that there are a lot of urgent issues that we need to address in Europe, and none of them is called working conditions because working conditions are part of all the other areas, such as freedom of artistic expression. And I'm really happy that you mentioned that because when we ran a survey, the State of Culture barometer for that report, we had very high response on artists and cultural workers that reported about self-censorship or at least self-correction, even when they had funding already in order to remain in the system. And it goes from very obvious cases like, I don't know, very obvious and shocking cases of artists that cannot talk about the situation in Gaza in Berlin, to more subtle cases where they know, okay, there's a sort of wokeness in the room that prevents me from expressing certain opinions, to, I don't know, really very subtle issues that you can hardly grasp, but it is something we need to talk about. Then, as a last point maybe, and then I can go into more detail in the conversation, as a last point, I would just like to say that I'm very, very about our fixation on data. Sorry to say that. I mean, we need it. It's great that you do this study. We are running the studies. We are not running these studies because we don't believe in data. But in a way, I see that data don't change the situation. We've got these studies for years. The OMC report is there since 2023. And in the second round, I can maybe delve a little bit deeper into what we hope that legislation could change. But for the moment, I just see that we keep, I keep making that reference to that Fellini movie of that crazy man climbing a tree and shouting "Voglio una donna," and then comes the little nun with a ladder and gets the man out of the tree. Like that's us saying, see us, see our precarity, recognize the work we do. You know, it's also the whole funding system that is designed on a project basis from year 1 to year 3, impact, sustainability, how will it work when it ends, show that your impact is not going away. That totally ignores the fact that as an artist or a cultural worker, when I'm under the shower in the morning, I'm working, my mind is busy with something. If I water the plants in the garden of my grandmother, I am working, because that kind of gives me, that's research, that gives me the ideas and the critical thinking I need to do my work. So, you know, it seems that only in Ireland they have understood it with giving a basic income to artists, because what an artist or a cultural worker do is putting their life experience into a work that impacts a community, and that's not being measured in 3 years, that's measured in a lifetime. And that sort of change of thinking, it seems we can throw data about that on the table one after the other, but as long as there's not a political will, as long as there's not an understanding on a very high level that what that sector does is a strategic investment in not only the resilience of a small sector, but into the resilience of a society in a changing world that is getting a very scary place. As long as that political insight is not there, we can produce as much data as we want.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you so much for also bringing this perspective of the cultural sector having a really important social role. And actually we asked also in our survey, we also find that people find that the work contributes a lot to the social good, but feel that there is no external recognition. Monica, I just gave you the microphone. Monica, please tell us how is this seen from the European Commission, so from the European institutions? Now we're speaking about, well, will we have a response from decision makers? We don't have decision makers from the national level as such, but what can you tell us from what's going on in Europe and at the European Commission?
Bună dimineața și mulțumesc pentru invitație. E întotdeauna o plăcere să revin în Cluj, în orașul studenției mele. So, thank you, Larissa, for this vast question. I would need probably 1 week to reply. I'm here in a very particular moment in time because you may have heard, or some of the people present here may have heard, that we are preparing at the level of the European Commission a new strategic a vision for culture policy in Europe, which is called the Cultural Compass. So it will show not necessarily the north, but the vision for what we should do in the EU for the future culture policy and how to be ahead, if possible, worldwide in how we think about culture policy. So this document, of course, I cannot talk about its contents. It will be published at the end of November in the Council, during the European Council for Culture, Sports and Education and Youth. And it will, of course, include a major chapter on artists' working conditions, because so I work in the European Commission in the Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, in a small team working on culture policy. And of course, artists' working condition and the status of the artists, and in general all topics related to artists are our main raison d'être. And we here, we have been aware of how difficult, how dire the situation of the artists is for many years now, but maybe people outside of our circle have not been, and maybe this was a little bit the silver lining of COVID, the COVID crisis, that other people understood not only what is the value of the artists and arts in their survival, but also how difficult the situation is for artists. There was more awareness raising, and artists spoke up about it. So this the complexity of the what we are talking about here is that it is at the intersection of so many different fields. So you have to talk about social policy, you have to talk about training and education, how to get skills, you have to talk about artistic freedom, you have to talk about health and well-being of artists, you have to talk about legislative initiatives like the status, social security, mobility, and all this is linked to this topic, and this is why it's also so difficult to, of course, come at the European level with a solution which is going to solve the problems, especially from the point of view of the EU treaties, which clearly give the power in this area to member states. Nevertheless, the European institutions have worked together very closely on this. So maybe you have heard about the European Parliament, which several times, at least in 2021 and 2024, asked the Commission to come with a proposal, a legislative proposal to improve the situation of artists in Europe. And of course, us in the European Commission, it's not only my Director General who is in charge of it, but we also work with the Director General of for Employment and Social Affairs and others. So it's a very complex network of different decision makers. But we work together, and we will publish in this compass hopefully something that will start bringing solutions in this area. Of course, the Council of the European Union is very important, and Lars mentioned this famous OMC system in which experts from the member states come together, and it's very important for them to learn with each other, because often they don't communicate, and also even inside the same country, maybe the culture ministry doesn't talk so much with the social affairs ministry or the education ministry, and this was the occasion for them in this OMC report, which was OMC process, for which the report was published 2 years ago, to really meet and exchange and get inspired. So we know that several member states do have an artist status. For example, Belgium, where I live, we do have. Ireland is making great progress with the basic income, as Lars said. In the Recovery and Resilience funds that the EU has distributed following COVID, also several member states have expressed the interest to work in the cultural policy field on the artistic on the status of artists and working conditions, including Romania. And I'm looking forward to hear from Romanian colleagues how this is going.
It's already done 2 years ago,
yes,
2.5 years ago.
So it was implemented. Hopefully it is bringing to the artists a bit more stability and a bit more clarity on how they can exercise their work. Maybe two things that I want to say about artistic freedom. We have worked a lot with through Creative Europe, the funding program for culture and creative sectors. We have worked a lot with our beneficiaries to understand what is needed, because this topic is a bit new, and it was part of the OMC report in 2023. But of course, other international organizations like UNESCO are working more on it, and also from the civil society, Free Muse, or ICORN, International Cities of Refuge Network. They are the experts. So we are in dialogue with them. They have been involved also in the consultations for the Compass, for this famous Culture Compass for Europe. And we have seen that there is a need for monitoring. Maybe you know the Free Muse report that is published yearly about the state of artistic freedom in the world. They also did one in Europe a few years ago, right before the COVID crisis started, in fact. So there is more need for monitoring, because we see, we always talk about, you know, Iran and Russia and China, etc. in the world, but actually in the EU we see that in various member states there are cases of censorship linked to different topics, like religious topics, or linked to state symbols, or linked to minorities, or linked to LGBTQI+ topics. So there is definitely something inside the EU that we should face and find a way to support artists in this, because, as I said, it's all interlinked. So, for example, precarious financial conditions affect artists' well-being, and also the censorship in their artistic freedom impact their mental health and well-being. I mean, some artists are harassed, they are arrested, they are, you know, prevented, from exercising their freedom. And artistic freedom is very broad. It doesn't mean. It also means the freedom to get paid for your work, and to freedom to exercise your international mobility, and freedom to access cultural work. So I want to bring here the words of Farida Shahid, who was the first and an extraordinary woman, a Pakistani activist and lawyer, who said that when we censor artistic freedom for artists, we also hit or we harm the possibility of audiences and of societies to access artistic works. So it works, you know, both ways. It's a two-way street, and sometimes we forget that. And of course, I also work on culture and health, and the health and well-being of artists, which is very nicely presented in your study. It's a new topic for us as well, because we tended to think about culture and health more from let's say the audience's point of view, and of course artists can provide so much value added for audiences' well-being and health, but we have to think about how to care for them as well. So this is something that has been again tackled in different Creative Europe projects sectorially. So for music, for circus artists, for dancers, and so on. So maybe I can talk a bit later. It's a vast subject, as I said, and I think we have to put all our heads together and make sure that we work with all the stakeholders in this process, which is really a huge task already.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Monica. I will pass the microphone to Iulia, because she's the one more knowledgeable. No, us all. Us all. I think it's useful to put us all up to date to these law provisions regarding the status of culture workers in Romania.
So first, I have to start by saying that what we have is called the status of the cultural worker, not of the artist, for two main reasons. One is that the fiscal policy of the Romanian state gives a lot of financial benefits for copywriting contracts and none for other kinds of contracts within the cultural field. And then, because it is much more difficult to identify in our legal system somebody working in the culture field as a culture worker, as other types of culture workers than as artists. And now, because everybody's looking strangely at me, let me explain. The highest level of protection that one can have is a labor contract. Labor contracts in Romania are heavily taxed. The difference between the taxation level which includes the general tax and health and social insurance, is sometimes twice as high compared to any other kind of contracts. So the general tendency in a non-regulated field such as culture is to avoid a type of contract that is highly taxed. And the Romanian state policy towards artists was the equivalent of the famous don't ask, don't tell. We don't ask, you don't pay. So, for instance, somebody who has a labor contract, who's employed, no matter where and doing no matter what, has a taxation of only 6% for all copywriting contracts, all, irrespective of the amount. The taxation on labor contracts is 43%. So, this incentivizes a certain type of relationship between artists and other activities that are protected by the copyright directive, and everybody who works with artists and other people doing protected activities, which is everything but a working labor contract with us. This situation, which lingers since forever, but it got very more complicated since 2018, reached a peak during the pandemics, where when all the cultural activity was stopped, the Romanian state, in its huge generosity, wanted to compensate people who were in the impossibility to do their job. But the problem was like that. Okay, the UNESCO in its higher generosity says that an artist is whoever identifies as such and is recognized as an artist by others. Well, a state cannot work with self-identification. So the issue was, okay, we want to compensate people, but how we identify legally and fiscally these cultural workers that were affected. Cultural workers that worked under labor contracts with no matter what kind of company, well, the husband's company, the mother's company, and so on, just to benefit from the fiscal privileges for copywriting contracts. A mass of technicians doing the most basic kind of personal labor, but under the guise of a company with no employee. It was one-person company with one shareholder and no employee, but it was a guy doing his technician stuff, but in the guise of a company, because it is fiscally better and cheaper than a labor contract. And so on and so forth. So during the pandemics, the Romanian state realized that, and the cultural sector realized, that one of the first issues that we should solve is who are the people working in culture, how we can identify them as a state. Because through the we don't ask, you don't pay policy, the idea was to totally leave the cultural field unregulated and incentivize all other forms, or tolerate all other forms of contracts than the labor contract. We are in the situation where even now, after the pandemics, public institutions, public theaters have technicians that are not employed, but contracted with occasional servicing. This is something where the person only pays health insurance. We will have technicians that forever won't ever have a pension. That's the situation where we had this reform called the Statute of the Cultural Worker within the National Plan of Recovery and Resilience. It was not very well received by artists because it was called the Statute of Cultural Worker. And in Romanian, we don't have a difference between work and labor. So a part of them, especially older ones, were very affected that they are not workers. The framework of this statute was conditioned by two factors: to be embedded within the existing national legislation, and not to create a parallel system. So the idea was that we had to invent something that was to take into consideration the national labor code, the national fiscal legislation, the national legislation regarding labor accidents, unemployment, and everything else. And taking into consideration all these limitations and the high level of conservatism that is typical for all state bureaucracies. So for everybody, all states have an administrative bureaucracy that hates changes. Romania is not different, even if the bureaucracy is even higher. So the main elements are that the Statute of the Cultural Worker offers sort of a special legal and fiscal status somewhere between employment and independent activity, the famous PFA, self-employment, which in Romania is very similar, is legally similar to a company, actually. It's not seen as being something where you employed only you, and that was another issue. So it offers this legal and fiscal status in between employment and independent activities with a lot of elements of protection from labor law. For instance, cultural workers have the right to associate in professional association that can negotiate working conditions and pay. Even if they cannot unionize, because they are not employed. And it's only based on a criterion related to revenue. So everybody and anybody who earn at least 50% of his or her total revenue of the previous year from cultural activities, either through term-limited working contracts, independent activities, copyrights, and now that's it, can apply. And the status is valid for 3 years and is renewable forever, as long as that person continues to get their main revenue from cultural activities. There were some things that are relevant only for Romanians. We can talk about them afterwards, that were term limited in the law, and they elapsed this year because the law was an emergency ordinance adopted in April 2023. It's not the best and the brightest status of cultural worker in the world. It has many things that can be done better, but for this it needs to operate as fully as possible with as many people enrolled as possible, because otherwise we cannot repair it. It's something new. It's something that had limits coming from the architecture of the Romanian state and the Romanian legal system. And for instance, that's why, for instance, we couldn't offer cultural workers labor accident protection. Because the law regarding labor accidents is so old that has to be rewritten entirely. And it was impossible to adopt it to other types of relationship than the very classical 19th century employment relationship, worker-employer. This law needs much more support from the cultural field because, as I said, it is something that could benefit from changes and improvements in an incremental approach of reforming and changing. And it has to change together with other things that are changing within the general architecture of the state. And it has to have a larger input from people actually working using this status. It was sort of an experiment. It was something very, very new. And I still believe that it depends on the will of the people to make it work in full. Otherwise, yes, it's cheaper than labor contracts, but more expensive than whatever else we work in the politics of we don't ask, you don't pay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Iulia. It's very informative, and I think Miki also wants to react immediately.
Yeah, thank you, Iulia. And because we have some students here, I think it's important for them to know what is the procedure for them and when they can benefit of this.
There was one of the first people that enrolled in this in the register of cultural workers earned 400 lei the previous year. Only 400 lei, so less than 100 euro. But all of them came from culture. So that person became a cultural worker because not the level of your income is important, but how you got that money. So for students, the source of information is the famous SDFC platform, so fonduri liniuț kratimăcultura.ro, and then I can give you more of a presentation. And the thing is that as long as you have, no matter how little money from cultural activities, in a contracted manner, you're eligible. It is not. It was not designed for emerging artists that are now entering the field and they didn't do. They were in the situation of having done something, so it doesn't propel entering culture. But the first year after you earn €1 from culture, you're eligible.
And if they are already working, still they are students, can they access it?
it doesn't matter. The only thing that doesn't go with this, with being a professional culture worker, that's the official title, is having a labor contract. Why? Because that's the standard. The highest level of protection you can get as a person in the European Union is a labor contract. As long as the status of the professional culture worker is an attempt to offer a kind of protection as similar as that of a labor contract without the possibility of equivalating it, it's pointless to offer this kind of protection to people who already have it. So it's not the only thing that is not compatible with is a labor contract.
I don't agree with you. I think I don't have a labor contract, but still I don't qualify for your register.
It might. We can discuss. There were two things. Unfortunately, because of things that I still don't understand. People didn't took advantage of the possibility existing for 2 years to register having service contracts and dividends, and and the eligibility of that kind of income elapsed in January this year, and now there's a huge national, let's say, effort to reinstate this eligibility again for a certain period of time. It was beyond us. We gave 2 years. We couldn't make them eligible forever because they are not professional revenues. It was only an acknowledgement of the fact that that's how it works in Romania. That's life. In Romania, most of people that don't earn their income in culture through copyrights are having dividends or servicing contracts. And it was important to have them there. But it was an eligibility valid for 2 years, it elapsed, and it has to be reinstated.
Yeah, I think that could get too technical. So my suggestion would be that while Iulia is here, we benefit from her knowledge and talk to her, because I think it's really valuable that we make use of what's there. But to extend back the conversation, I would move to Irina, and I would like to ask you. Obviously, whenever, when things are happening, like before the end of September, everybody in the cultural sector is stressed because they are writing applications to the Romanian National Cultural Fund. Obviously, it is the key source of funding for all of us. We are aware that AFCN is not a decision maker. I mean, it's not a policy maker, but we know that the way in which things work with this funding is very much directly linked to how the cultural life goes on in Romania. So that's why we would really like to hear your perspective on what you see in your work, and also how you see that supporting culture workers could be reflected maybe in some of the priorities or something that goes with the grants that AFCN is offering.
Thank you, Rarița, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. Well, I'm involved with this, the administration of the National Cultural Fund since 10 years now. And when I arrived on the job, everybody was preparing to close the administration and get new jobs. And then little by little we managed to communicate with the politicians and the decision makers, and from a budget of 1 million, we had this year 100,000 millions in funding, which I think it's a very important aspect. Of course, money is never enough. And of course, the grants level increased. and now it's from the equivalent of 50,000 euro to the equivalent of, I don't know, 100,000 euro for the multi-annual projects. Still, money is not enough. And this, because of the fact that Romania is a very special context in which everything, all funds can be misused, we were forced to enforce some rules and some procedures to make sure that money are really used for what they are meant to, as it is public money. So the financial reporting procedure had to adapt. And of course, everybody who is involved in a project funded by AFCN during these times is very stressed about the new financial reporting procedure, but I'm very confident in saying that it's not that bad as it looks. I myself tried to introduce a project and report financially a project, and it's not that complicated as it sounds. The problem, however, is the lack of professional training, because a choreographer, a theater professional, a visual artist is not supposed to do financial reporting. So when they get confronted to this, they may get stuck. And probably one of the solutions to have a better life would be to get some professional training in this field, or to find a professional doing that. Maybe organizing some training via Zoom or via other ways to make people understand what public accounting means and what the documents required are, might help. I'm not saying that everybody should turn into an accountant, but it's important to have this information and to know what is required and to understand the logic and the necessity of those documents. This of course, when you don't know what you do, of course that adds stress and doesn't contribute to your well-being. So, of course, the best thing to improve your well-being is not only care and live in a context of care and empathy, but also to do what you are trained for and what you like to do. Unfortunately, in Romanian context, and not only, this is rarely possible. The cultural management training is in very few university cities existing. I don't know, is there a cultural management training in Cluj? Yeah?
Miki is the one leading
it. In Bucharest, in the Arts University, there isn't. There is one in the Theatre and Film Academy. I'm not sure if in Timișoara there is such a training. But basically, from the communist times when everyone was taken care, either being employed or being enrolled in a public system like the Union for Creators, to the after '89 moment when people were either employed in a state or a private system or self-employed, there is this ambiguous space Iulia was talking about, and the reality of the fact that half of your budget goes on taxes when you have to budget salaries is quite frustrating. And when it has to come out of your own pocket, because you create the project, you get the funding, and you have to pay. And when you find that out of the amount you budgeted, half goes on taxes, and at the end of the day, you don't get very much cash, you don't get very much net income for what you did, gets frustrated. And as Iulia likes to say, people are looking for shortcuts, fiscal optimization, for shortcuts. on a short term is a solution, and it may be rewarding and increasing your well-being. But on a long-term perspective, you will have no pension, you will have no health insurance, and a lot of other things. Of course, it's a difficult choice. The easiest way is to find someone to pay you. It's rarely possible, especially in the world of culture. But I'm looking at the projects that get funding from the National Cultural Fund. And of course, it's a world of people highly sensitive who put their souls online and creativity, and they are very fragile and very vulnerable to any situation that might create conflict or might challenge or might give up frustration. This is why what I would strongly recommend is to professionalize the roles that have to be taken in cultural management, and delegate or get trained to do things as they have to be done. Otherwise, there will be this permanent compromise and permanent frustration that you work too much for what you get paid. And I don't think it can work on a long run. Already people from our generation got this experience. I myself was involved in a foundation for 25 years, and it was very difficult to pay the people who worked for me. And I had to choose whether I would pay myself or I would pay the project coordinator. And then at the end, when I opted to get involved in the National Cultural Fund, was for trying to improve the funding situation. At a certain extent, I think I managed to do something, but I know how difficult it is to be self-employed or to have to manage an institution, because a foundation, an association is an institution. And it cannot be as a personal project, because when other people are involved, you are responsible for them. So, of course, within the last years, there is a large number of NGOs that has been created, and I'm not sure how many thought it well from the very beginning and realized what the responsibilities. Because of course it's a great tool to do projects, to have access to funding, but at the same time it's a great responsibility as well, and you have to care about your co-workers, about the people you work with. So of course we always come to a moment we feel like children and we want to be taken care of, even us at AFCN, because we are only 20 people working there and you are thousands, but that's not always possible, and you have to prioritize somehow sometimes. Of course, how to say it, the part which is not really covered is the part regarding the well-being of the cultural workers, the artists and the people involved in the cultural field. Usually projects organized, projects submitted and funded, many of them have this concern with regards to the community, with regards to the audience. There are a lot of projects going from involving communities and to art therapy and providing for people in difficulty, either ill or disabled, or not having access to culture. So I think in terms of priorities, regulating the selection process, we are kind of covered. I don't really see now how we could introduce some priorities to cover also the people organizing the projects. But we are also trying to find ways, at least to design something that would give NGOs a break in terms of running costs. But that,
I could also
has
imagine,
to be
for instance,
discussed.
allowing a 20% spend on organizational development that could allow people to fill that gap in professionalization, or having activities that are specific to their own NGO to take care of their team. I could imagine that, for instance, that doesn't need to be in a priority.
You know, there are a lot of things that are expected from us, like training. We are not training providers, but nobody stops somebody to organize a training program, projects to provide professionalization in the various fields for other colleagues. So we cannot train people how to fill in a form, or we can give the technical things. But it is possible and there are several NGOs throughout the country who organize training sessions like that.
Okay, I see. So thank you, Irina. Do you want to add something?
No.
Because you want to say something. I would like to open the discussion, but then we have two more interventions. Do you have the patience to go to 2 more speaks, or do you have something direct?
It's hot, yes.
It's hot. We do it, but we will not extend the conversation more right now because we want to have 2 more. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Anca Doțiluchian, and I'm part of those 10% that that chosen not to stay just in the art sector because I would never had a baby, for example. I would never had a child if I would stay. I lived for 10 years in UK, and I've been an artist there, and there is Arts Council, if you know, in UK. It's the same thing in Britain. And they give funding, but they also give training on the methodology of reporting and how to apply. So I understand you're not it's not a priority to train people as in general, but I think would be a great way forward to teach your methodology to those who are applying. Yeah.
You know, we just did this 2 weeks ago. I myself did this training with the people who were available to get online. But it's not, I'm not referring to the application methodology. I'm referring to other skills that are required by cultural management and that we are not, we cannot do it.
Sure. You started the conversation with the funding, being able to manage the funding. And you suggested that artists are not that able or that informed on how to manage their budgets when they are applying. And what I'm suggesting is, like, I have managed UNICEF funding, which was much harder than that. So I do really understand what you're saying. It's not that bad, the reporting. It's not that bad. But management, it's new, and managing funds, it's new. So I think you could do much more work because you are the ones who can gather the artists and help them understand how
my
my perspective is that Irina answered to that question.
I want to answer because Irina cannot say it fully. My legal training is crying in order to say that the idea is that no granting authority can organize its own training for people applying, because within the Romanian legal framework, it would be conflict of interest and unfair competition. You know, because people, you know, organization managers who would participate at that particular training would get an advanced knowledge compared to others that could want to participate in the granting system, but not to that particular, you know. So the idea is not for every granting authority to organize training for how they are organizing their granting process, but to us all to organize in specific and providing specific services for training for the specificities of certain granting programs. But otherwise, this is, I want to kill this idea for as many times as possible. AFCN, project centers Timișoara or the Ministry of Culture, unfortunately, within our legal framework, cannot do this, cannot provide this kind of training. We had the same issue in trying to provide legal support and things like that within the Ministry of Culture for the independent sector, and the response from the Ministry of Justice was see if you find a park or something like that, forget about it.
Okay.
I
well,
just want to
I think
add one
I know the
thing.
discussion needs to go up now, but
Yeah.
but I would not allow that before Ramona and Miki have their
Sure.
say,
Just-
because I'm
just-
afraid that this will not happen anymore.
Let me add one more thing, because you mentioned the UK. We are part of an international platform bringing together all the funders throughout the world. And when we have the European chapter, everybody is presenting what their funding status is and what they are doing, what their strategies are. And on one hand, an important issue is that we are facing very difficult times. And when we had in May our most recent, the latest meeting we had, all the countries were cutting budgets for culture because funds were directed towards war costs. So somehow we are in a so far privileged situation that nobody touched our funds for culture. But the second thing that I noticed was that there is a gap in priorities. In Romania, the priority we see first is access to culture, whereas in Britain, since 2-3 years already, there is this concern for the well-being of the artists. So there is a longer democratic experience, there is a different establishment of the cultural field. People do not need to affirm their position and to be recognized. And from this perspective, there is the place and the interest to care for the well-being aspect. I'm very happy this issue was raised by the CCC here in Cluj, and it started earlier. I mean, we don't have to solve the access to culture priority before we get to well-being, but we have to put into perspective what the local priorities are as well, and at what level we have to cover them all and how to share the interest.
Ideally, we would be having space for all of this. So, Ramona, yes.
Thank you.
What's on in Timișoara?
Well, when I was listening to the results of the study, I was thinking, oh my God, what we are doing at the local level, at the city level, could be just a drop in the ocean in this context. And then Lars presented the higher picture, the European context. But nonetheless, I think what is happening in Timișoara, it's more than a drop in the ocean, and I'm happy to be here and to talk about it. And well, at the Center for Projects, I think it's important to say that it's a young organization. It's a young cultural institution that it's subordinated to the local council. But I think intentionally and unintentionally there are several results which are remarkable for what has been achieved since 2021, since spring 2021. And one of this is the constant funding programs. And if Irina was saying that the budget of the Romanian Cultural Fund, it's around 100 million lei, well, in Timișoara, 25 million lei was given for a multi-annual, just for one funding program, a multi-annual funding program. And then there were the other annual funding programs that are about 14 million lei a year. So the municipality has been consistently maintaining this funding that started with the European Capital of Culture program preparation, especially during the last 2 years before the ECOC title, and then following 2024 and 2025. What we try to do better is that we had regular meetings. Once we launched the open calls, we had meetings with the cultural operators and questions, sessions, meeting them, answering their questions about each and every program that we have launched and addressing them before they submitted their projects. So this was an important step. We call it a power station program. We haven't been able to build it up strongly yet, but this year we did organize a school for cultural projects, and in this we addressed newly applicants to the funding programs of the Center for Projects. So those that haven't had before a funding from the Center for Projects, who came and who we encouraged them to come already with an idea, with a concept for a project, and we helped them to shape it better in order to apply for certain funding lines. And what we've seen that it's in a network analysis that we did as part of the evaluation report for the European Commission of the culture program, what we have seen is that there are certain significant changes in the sector, in the local cultural sector. So there's more cultural operators that have moved to Timișoara because funding is available. Artists have moved to Timișoara because funding is available. And there is a combo in the funding programs between funding that is addressed to cultural organizations and funding that is addressed to individuals. So we have the creative scholarships, we call them, and we have a mobility fund as well that matches somehow the application process of Culture Moves Europe. We try to simplify a lot these two funding lines because the others are heavily regulated by the national legislations in terms of documentation that needs to be filled in and submitted for the applications. What was another important aspect is that payments of the installments of the funding are on time, and this has offloaded a lot of the pressure. So there is an anticipation. We know that we get 85% of our budget when we sign the contract, and we get the other 15% when we submit our financial report. And that's very important for the operators to be able to schedule their activities. Well, these are the positive things, all right? And I don't want only to brag about what the Center for Projects is doing. In terms of the language of care, because we address this very little here, and I'm also a person that is coming from, let's say, the other side of the barricade into the public system, into the public cultural sector. And yes, often I found myself within public cultural institutions, you have the people who are very much mission-driven, like the artists and creators, and I see some of them here in the public from Timișoara, and I'm happy that they are here. and the tension between people who are the finance, admin, legal team, and finding a common language with them and a common language of care towards the beneficiaries of these funding programs. It's difficult sometimes. So what we did is that we actually organized some guided tours. We took them out of the office, all the team. Let's go and see a project. Let's go and see together an exhibition for them to understand for what this money is used, because Irina was talking about the responsibility for money that is public funding. But on the other side of the spectrum, I found myself recently in a conversation with an auditor from the National Agency of Curtea de Conturi, I don't know the translation accounts, yeah, agency from Romania, the county one in Timișoara, and I had to defend what we understand as a cultural project and get into an argument of a very subjective way, of a personal way the auditor sees what a cultural project is. And this, I found it absurd. And I try to argument that we have a separate evaluation commission that it's evaluating the projects that are submitted with independent evaluators that are cultural professionals and so on. So it's not even us, the institution, that fills out that all the criteria that the project is cultural or not. So there are, of course, there are a lot of things that we get as feedback from the cultural operators. I will just one more minute, Raisa, so that it's not too long. There is the pressure of the calendar, of the funding calendar. In Romania. Yes, we have a multi-annual program in the sense that the cultural operators do not have to apply yearly for that funding, but the budget is annual. So let's keep that in mind. Once the state budget is approved, then the local budget is approved, then we can secure the funding. So this adds a pressure. Short time to submit the applications. Once we try to speed up the calendar, because once the local budget is approved, then we try to shorten the actual application time in order for the operators to have more time to implement their projects. And then end of November, so we launched them in spring, end of November, there's already the submission of the financial reports. We talked very little about digitalization, and I think it's important. Processes are partially digitalized, actually, so only the application process, it's online, but all the back-end work, the signing of the contracts, the submission of the financial reports, and so on, at least for us at the Center for Project, is still heavily paper-based. So you see people coming with 8 folders to our office, and we try to work on that as well. Then, once the funding is secured, there are a lot of changes in the projects. We receive a lot of notifications. We cannot bring this artist anymore. We cannot organize this activity anymore. And it's all normal, but it adds a lot of work to the coordinators of the funding program. It adds also a lot of negotiations between the team coordinating the funding processes and the team overseeing the finances of how these funds are used. And of course, cultural operators would like to have more diversified funding programs catering to their focuses, to their needs. And this is always a difficult negotiation. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. We have 10 minutes left. So, Miki, if you, yes, you can give maybe more your reflection and also what you are working now with the young and the next generation of young culture professionals. So, what are your reflections on this?
I had a lot of I had a lot of ideas, but I'll try to synthesize. Maybe first I will say that the first cultural institution that really sent care to the cultural sector was AFCN, and still is, but now we are in an accelerated time of precarization of work, of digitalization, and I think we really had to give time to understand what are these phenomena affecting the field, and we cannot just transform our procedures by night to digitalize all the processes without having discussions in the field and to prepare the field for this. Ramona, you said that you had quite a fight with the people from the, what is the name? Curtea de Conturi? Chamber of Accounts. Yeah, and I think the training should be both. Not only the sector needs training, but also these people need training. No?
They would be happy to.
Because there is a need to mutual understand what they are looking for. Okay, of course, responsibility, I think it's something that we all need to have in our activity, but also there is a responsibility for their part to understand the field and to be more open to the specificity of the field. Really, with all these transformations that are accelerating our cultural life, if I would start now, as my students are, I don't think I would work in the cultural field. Really, really. And one of the questions that is put quite often in our classes, is there a normal life if I choose to work in the cultural field? There is one student who just said that this is one of the things that she's thinking daily. Yesterday evening, somebody else told me, I'm not sure I'm prepared for this field. Why? Because there are also personal issues regarding narcissistic figures, but also because it's a big difficulty to project yourself, to be a professional, to see yourself in 10 years working in the field, seeing your now maybe younger colleagues, but they are already in the field. You see them, they are in burnout. Maybe you don't want to be in burnout next year when you finish the master degree. And I cannot answer them, well, you should resist, you should fight for what? If you don't have meaning anymore because your work is precarious and you cannot project yourself in the field, I think it's a problem it's a systemic problem. And also, I appreciate the fact that you want to tackle things that we can still adapt and introduce the care in our work. And I think this has to be systemic, not individually. We can be nice to each other in our associations, but it stays in a small scale. So what can be done in a bigger scale? Irina, I think, yes, access to culture is a priority, but at least in AFCN, we can put the well-being of the teams and the fairer relations in the teams as a transversal priority. I don't see why not.
You are in the board of AFCN.
Yes.
It's the second year you are now,
yes.
So it's not me you have to tell this.
Okay, but I also...
So Miki, we are now advocating with you. Please put this in the board of AFCN.
Of course, I will put this, but I also send questions to other members of the board, and nobody's answering on this. So it's not like... yeah, please. If you want to say something.
Yeah, maybe especially to that, because I think it relates to a bigger discussion that we need to lead, that we started to lead on a European level, but that we need to dive in deeper, which is the question about instrumentalization of culture. And although I deeply believe that culture is an instrumental aspect to change our societies for the better. We should not instrumentalize it. And I think this access question is really related to that, because we are talking about figures. How many people come into our theaters, museums? What happens with them? Are they healthier if they leave? Are they more happy? Whatever. And
sorry, here we have much basic idea about
yes,
this.
but I think, no, where I want to get is that the other aspect, the well-being aspect, where we can say, whatever happens, whatever the artist does with the money we give them is instrumental on the long run, is a different sort of discussion. And then we talk about care in the cultural sector and trust on the long run that transformation will happen. And it's a different mindset, that's a politically different mindset and not an accounting mindset.
We are not in the accounting mindset. We are in the mindset of
I'm not sure.
an infrastructure. I'm sorry to disappoint you. We are in a situation where the basic infrastructure for everything related to culture is crumbling outside any place that is not a big city. We are not talking about the happiness of people going to the theater, but if anybody can go to the theater in half of the country. We have the basic thing of what exists in terms of the actual possibility of somebody to go to something that that person can call culture, even if it's a religious choir. That thing is shrinking to the non-existent now in Romania, except for the big cities.
Yeah, we're speaking about cultural rights, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Okay, that's a different perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's why I need to. I'm sorry to be an accountant here, but that's why I wanted to explain to you that we are not taking words from I don't know what European thing. We are in a much more basic situation where access to culture is that actually there is a door to open.
It refers to seeing a book in your lifetime.
Mm.
So there are a lot of communities outside of the cities in the proximity of Bucharest. There are schools where children have never touched a book, have never owned a book. So this is the extent of access to culture in Romania.
I'm not challenging that. I'm just saying if we are on a conceptual level.
You have two complicated issues at the European level.
Yeah.
We are much more
Yeah.
basic.
No, but if we compare the Arts Council of England with, then we are on that level of conceptual thinking.
We're probably not really. But I will get back to Miki because she didn't finish her point. Yeah.
But I think the human resources are the most important. Finally, they are the transmitters of culture to a generation, from a generation to another one. So I think we should care about their lives. And also, I think life is more important than culture. And if they will not, the younger generation will not find how to live out of culture, I think it's a good decision to leave the cultural field. Sorry to say it, but you need to live. And
life is culture. So yeah.
Yeah. So I had another conversation with an alumni of us, and she said that she was doing quiet quitting because she didn't find any joy in the organization where she worked, because people were really tired and they didn't see the next day, finally. And to start to work in this condition, it's quite deceiving for the young generation. And let's do something, but what?
Yeah. Well,
start with what?
You see, actually, we talk about care, but actually we don't even talk about care. We talk about subsistence, an economy of subsistence in the case of the sector. And what we really wanted to see is rather to put the accent on solidarities, on what are the type of actions or community acts, I don't even know what's the right wording, that we can do together to ask something or to do together to provide more sane local or regional context, you know. So, and I'm really sorry I take this on completely on myself that I was not able to manage the time in a better way, so we engage more in a dialogue. But we are going now to have 1 hour in which we are suggesting that we are in a dialogue on different topics. So I hope you forgive me by going into these groups with the energy that you the questions and things that you wanted to share in those groups. Let's say if there is like if we are able to take like 1, 2 very short and maybe directed towards what to do rather than adding other things. Yeah.
Say something positive.
Yes,
not only
Miki,
negative.
please.
An example from Cluj, another alumni of us, which is working in theater dance performances. She realized that she can develop the projects only by having a good connection with the other colleagues that are in contemporary dance. And she started an association with other youngsters, and because they all apply for the same funds at AFCN, they realized that they will not get funding all the time, all the 3 associations that are collaborating, and they find a solution. Everybody is invited in the others' projects in a meaningful way, not just as a hope to resist. So if someone does not get the funding, at least it's present in the cultural scene and can present the works. I think this can be
Thank you, Miki.
a model that can be replicated.
That's a very good example that can come. So Polona, 20 seconds, Polona, that's the hardest challenge in the world.
20 seconds impossible. So the concept of care to me sounds very union thing. So we are very tired. We are not listened by our employers or people who give us work. So we're kind of silently quitting just to focus on our conditions. But what I find really interesting in returns, I'm an advocate for independent culture in Slovenia. So I have similar problems that you are talking about, but we've been kind of proactive in organizing ourselves, like really knowing the law, really telling what the law should be, how the financing should be spread, suggesting really concretely. So organizing among ourselves, us caring for others. So also thinking about our roles as artists. That means, okay, we know how the society function, what's the ideal, talking about it, doing interventions, using mediums to spread a message, and basically advocating or lobbying, if you want to, for societal change. So I see there's a lot of this outsourcing needs that need to be solved by somebody else. Like, for example, please do educational programs on how to apply. Please organize yourselves. I mean, we do a lot of trainings. We go and talk how the funds should be delegated, what should be the priorities. I mean, you're not, how do you say, I know you're tired, but you're not helpless. So please play, be artists, and organize.
Great. Thank you, Polona. I think that's, I'm really happy that by the end of the conversation we have at least 2 calls or 2 examples about how we can do things in solidarity. Well, yes, you know, I know this was already a long panel and we need a break. And will you forgive me for that, please? I think we need to go to have a break. We are going to have a break until 12? And that's time to also engage with each other and with our panelists. Thank you so much for being here and exposing yourselves. And we are going to be back at 12 in the smaller discussions.